Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. So it is finally March. The weather is finally getting warmer. It is not like crazy freezing out or snowing. It was literally like 67 degrees in New York yesterday, which was like awesome. It was so nice. But yes, I am aware that this video is also very delayed. I apologize for that. I got back from Toronto and I thought I was going to have time to film, but I just didn't. I got kind of swamped with work. I have a new cocktail program that I'm working on. So I have been like crazy busy. I'm going to be crazy busy for the next like week and a half, 2 weeks finalizing this. So I really apologize for any delays. I'm going to try my best to get them up in their normal schedule, but I can't guarantee it. But I will definitely still be doing at least 2 a week. That I should be able to do. Anyways, it is March, so it's time for our February wrap up. February was 29 days this year because it was a leap year, which means that, well, nothing really, but I did get through 5 books, hoping to get through 6, which is kind of the same old song and dance. I think my biggest issue this month was that I was reading, and still am reading, Full Immersion by Gemma Amor, and I am struggling so hard with it, and I really want to DNF it, but I'm not going to because I want to do a review on it because I have a lot of things to say about this book. But like I need to power through it, and I'm like 2/3 of the way through and I am struggling so hard. I can literally only read like 20 to 30 pages at a time before I have to put it down. But I really want to talk about it, so I will eventually be finishing it, hopefully this month, but who knows. I had to read all of these books in between just to get through like 20 to 30 pages a day. Anyway, let's chat about this month's reads. So first up in February, I read The House of Last Resort by Christopher Golden. If you have seen my most anticipated reads list for 2024, this was on here. I'm a big fan of Christopher Golden. I really was excited about the concept of this. So I picked it up right around when it came out and I devoured it. I really, really did. I'm going to read the inside flap for you guys. And I do have a full in-depth review on this book. Almost every book in this video I think has a review, and I think there's 2 that don't, and one of the ones that doesn't will have a review literally right after this video goes up. So be on the lookout for that. So it says, across Italy there are many half-empty towns, nearly abandoned by those who migrated to the coast or to cities. The beautiful crumbling hilltop town of Boogyman is among them, but its mayor has taken drastic measures to rebuild, selling abandoned homes to anyone in the world for a single euro, as long as the buyer promises to live there for at least 5 years. It's a no-brainer for an American couple, Tommy and Kate Puglisi. Both work remotely, and Boogyman is the home of Tommy's grandparents, his closest living relatives. It feels like a romantic adventure, an opportunity the young couple would be crazy not to seize. But from the moment they move in, they both feel a shadow has fallen on them. Tommy's grandmother is furious, even a little frightened, when she realizes which house they've bought. There are rooms in an annex at the back of the house that they didn't know were there. The place makes strange noises at night, locked doors are suddenly open, and when they go to a family gathering, there are certain people are whispering about them, and about their house, which one neighbor refers to as the House of Last Resort. Soon they learn that the home was owned for generations by the church. But the real secret and the true undead is unlocked when they finally learn what the priests were doing in this house for all those long years, and how many people died in the strange chapel inside. While down in the catacombs beneath Boogyman, something stirs. So I very much enjoyed this book. This was a very like quick and easy read. I had recently been to Paris where I went to the catacombs, which I believe this is kind of heavily referencing, even though this is set in Italy and I know there are catacombs in Italy. But the kind of like vibe and stylization of the catacombs reminded me a lot of what they have in the Paris catacombs. I was going, I don't know what that sound is outside. I'm sure you guys can hear it. Maybe it's a street sweeper. I don't know. It's going away now. Anyways, I went into this, also please excuse my nails, I know they look terrible. I was going into this expecting this to be more of like a ghost story. And it was less of a ghost story and more of like a like exorcist possession story, which was cool, but I didn't see it coming. So just be aware that that's kind of where the horror comes through. And I thought it was very, very well done, but I did think it was a little too subtle in times, and I kind of wanted it to be scarier. There were definitely some twists and turns in this story that I found very, very interesting and fun. But there were also a lot of like plot points that I thought were very, very unnecessary or should have and could have been expanded on and weren't. I definitely said this in my review, but I'm really not sure how I felt about the ending of this novel. Looking back on it now that it's been a couple weeks since I read this book, like, I think I'm a little bit more okay with everything that happened at the climax than I was in the beginning. I just kind of felt like I needed more explanation and more answers to the question of why, which I really felt this book was lacking. That being said, this was a very, very fun, quick, and easy read with a really cool, amazing, beautiful Italian setting. I loved the setting. I've been to Europe quite a few times, and you could just really feel like the old charm of an older city in Europe, and I really did love that. Christopher Golden has consistently kind of pushed out these like 4-star reads for me. Like, I loved All Hallows, and I definitely liked it more than this. And this was definitely up there with like Road of Bones kind of territory, where it was fun, it was really interesting, but also at the same time kind of forgettable over time. But if you're into Christopher Golden, I would definitely give this a shot. It was a 4-star read for me. Again, I enjoyed it. I read it very, very, very quickly. It really pulled me out of that reading slump that I had reading the Gemma and Moore novel. But I wasn't blown away with it the way I was hoping to be while I was talking about it in my like most anticipated list. But definitely a really, really cool book. All right, next up, we have The Paleontologist by Luc Dumas. I do have a full in-depth review on this. This was a book. This is a book for people who like dinosaurs, and I definitely said that in my review. I went really in-depth on this, and I feel like this is a book trying very hard to make a reimagining of like Jurassic Park set in a more contained environment, and using the idea of the impressions of ghosts versus an actual haunting as a way to tell a unique ghost story. And I have to give Luc Dumas props for that. I'm going to read the inside flap for you guys. Curator of Paleontology, Dr. Simon Neely never expected to return to his Pennsylvania hometown, let alone the Hawthorne Museum of Natural History. He was just a boy when his 6-year-old sister Morgan was abducted from the museum under his watch, and the guilt has haunted Simon ever since. After a recent breakup and the death of the aunt who raised him, Simon feels drawn back to the place where Morgan vanished, in search of the bones they never found. But from the moment he arrives, things aren't what he expected. The Hawthorne is a crumbling ruin, still closed amid the ongoing pandemic, and plummeting toward financial catastrophe. Worse, Simon begins seeing and hearing things he can't explain. Strange animal sounds, bloody footprints that no living creature could have left. A prehistoric killer looming in the shadows of the museum. Terrified he's losing his grasp on reality, Simon turns towards the handwritten research diaries of his predecessor and uncovers a blood-soaked mystery 150 million years in the making that could be the answer to everything. And so I really wanted to love this book because I love dinosaurs, and I really love how Luc Dumas really put so much attention into the dinosaur aspect of this book. However, I just find everything else about it to be quite messy. I wasn't connected at all to our main character. I found him very, very naive and very, very self-centered in a kind of like veiled as kind of innocent way. I just didn't love him. He had this whole kind of like woe is me vibe pushing himself through the narrative that I really didn't love. And he had a lot of like, and this isn't even our character's fault, this is the author's fault. Many of the revelations in this novel happened because of happenstance. Our main character would randomly run into somebody or randomly stumble upon something that helped him further the mystery while still actively trying to act as like the detective of the story to figure out what was going on. But he didn't actually do any concrete detective work to find out any answers. Everything was just thrown at him. And to me, that was extremely lazy story writing. I wasn't a fan of it at all. And just kind of found it to be very blah because of it. I don't want to read a story where our main character just has everything handed to him on a silver platter and then can be deemed the hero of the story when he isn't deserving of it. I like to see stories where detectives work and they're actively searching, and it's not just this mysterious, ooh, I saw this haunting and it made me think to look here, and then I looked here, and what do you know, this random like person showed up and told me every answer that I needed. Like, that kept happening, and it was just so unrealistic that it kept taking me out of the narrative. I had a lot of issues with this book, and the reason it's a 3-star read is solely because the whole dinosaur aspect of the story elevates it for me, because I do really like paleontology. I think it's really cool. I love natural history museums. I loved the setting of this book, being in a natural history museum. And as I said in my review, my stepmom for many years worked here in New York at the Natural History Museum, so I get to go and see like a lot of the stuff that is behind the scenes at that museum. So I was really able to engage with that aspect of this story because I have seen many of like the settings that are discussed about in here, like the labs and stuff, and like the preparing for exhibits and whatnot. So that to me was really, really cool. And again, I enjoyed that, but as an overall like ghost story kind of murder mystery, it just fell very, very flat to me, and the payoff I just was underwhelmed with because I didn't care. So that is that. 3 stars. Okay, next up we have The Bedmakers by Chad Lutzke and John Bowden, and I also have a whole review on this. I'm going to read the back real quick. After 2 elderly men tire of their homelessness in downtown Chicago in 1979, they hop on a train in search of work out west. But before their last stop, a traumatic event in an empty train car steers their once hopeful journey into a path of chaos filled with deceit, murder, grave robbing, and dormant secrets. I said in my initial review of this book that I have never read anything standalone by Chad Lutzke over his collaborations before, and I've never read anything by John Bowden. So I really don't want to judge these authors based on a collaborative work when I am not familiar with their distinct voices. That being said, didn't love this. This was a story that I felt has been told a bajillion times in a bajillion different ways that was extremely predictable and just left me with so many unanswered questions. Like, there's a mystery going on, you're trying to unravel what's happening, they're using it as like a form of social commentary without really diving into the aspects of the social commentary to make an actual statement. It gets very, very jumbled, and I feel like it was almost added. It's just like something that's a fad to do nowadays in horror, is to kind of include this contemporary social commentary. But I kind of felt that they had nothing else to say apart from like, racism is bad. Like, I really wasn't sure what they were trying to do, because the characters that they used to convey that message definitely had a very gray interpretation of racism. And so that entire plot point to me made very little sense. It just didn't send the message I think they were trying to send home. And I would have liked to have seen it done either in a very more tactful, poignant way, or not at all, because it added almost nothing to the story whatsoever. I found our characters very flat. I kept getting them confused because they were both so similar in the way that they spoke and acted, and they kind of traded off what each character did with what scene, like very like in a good cop, bad cop kind of way, but they would like flip who wanted to act in what way. Very difficult for me to understand, very difficult for me to follow. Our main character, Jeannie, was filled with a lot of guilt about a lot of things, but to me it felt very, very misplaced. And so I was like really trying to kind of resonate with both of these characters, and I had a very difficult time doing so because they just very much felt like typical one-note kind of caricatures of characters in like outsiders in a small town story. Also commenting on the small town story, there was a lot of weird, quirky, questionable things happening in the small town that, like, apart from the main like bad guy, we just ignored. They loved introducing these like crazy, kooky characters doing these very morally questionable things, and then we're just kind of like, that happened, cool. And you're like, no, you don't get to say that somebody is doing something super, super disturbing and just be like, we're cool with it, because like, is it hurting anybody? I don't know. Is it really messed up and weird and freaky? Yep. Are multiple people doing weird things like that? Also, yes. Do we care at the end? No. We're not going to give you any answers or resolutions on that whatsoever. And I was like, that was the most interesting part of the book. That was I wanted the whys to all of those questions, not the whys to the most predictable storyline ever. Like, it was a story. This felt very amateurish to me, and I know that Chad Lutzke is a very well-liked, very well-loved author, so I don't believe him to be an amateur author. So I was really stunned that this felt so predictable and almost like a first draft. It's almost like they collaborated on this 20 years ago and then just now got it published. I don't know. It just didn't work for me, and I wanted it to, but it didn't. 3 stars. It was really short and it was very hard for me to get through. Like, it took me it was 159 pages and it took me way longer than I was expecting. And on top of all of that, like, I really thought this was going to be like, and I said this in my review, like kind of like a boxcar children's story where most of the story takes place like on this moving train setting, and that to me sounded awesome. It's not. It's just like the catalyst that sets the plot forward, and then you don't really see a train after the initial climax of the beginning to set the premise off. So did not love that. 3 stars. We'll definitely try Chad Bowden. We'll definitely try Chad Lutzke and John Bowden on their own, though. I do think that they deserve to have their individual books read and not be judged on a collaboration. Next up, I will be doing a full review on this book. Be on the lookout for it. I meant to film it before I left for Toronto and didn't have time, so it will be up. It will be my next video. But this is Boogyman by Christopher Triana. It says, he's not Freddy, he's not Jason, he's all washed up. I'm gonna read the back of the book for y'all. As Nicky Hector, the unstoppable slasher from the lunatic horror movie franchise, Jonathan Zane reached levels of fame once unimaginable to a young actor. On top of headlining 15 films, he appeared on MTV, had his own 976 number, and became one of the most recognizable faces of the 1980s. But that was 30 years ago. Now it's 2010, and Zane is a has-been celebrity making his living signing autographs at fan conventions, a relic of the bygone slasher movie boom. He's broke, separated from his wife and children, lives in a crummy apartment, and hasn't landed a role in years. When he learns the studio is remaking Lunatic, he thinks it's his chance for a comeback. But Red Max Studios isn't interested in resurrecting Zane's fame. They want the reboot to have a new face, to escape the campiness that plagued the latter films in the Lunatic series. For the studio, this is a brand new start. For Jonathan Zane, it's the last straw. Discovering the remake is being filmed at the same rafting center as the original, and his former final girl co-star Lola Lang is involved. Zane begins a descent into insanity. He slips into his old costume, sharpens his meat cleaver, and brings the Nicky Hector character back from the dead for one last bloodbath. I loved this book. I love this book. I love this book. I love this book. And it's not just because Christopher Triana sent me this book. He did. And thank you so much, Christopher Triana. I love this. This was a 2022 release from Triana. So in between Gone to See the Riverman and Along the River of Flesh, right in between those two. And this is great. This is a love letter to slasher films, very similar to how Stephen Graham Jones is doing My Heart is a Chainsaw as his own personal love letter to slasher films. Same with Adam Cesare and Clown is a Cornfield. So if you like those books, you're going to love this. This, though, I really appreciate because it draws upon a lot of aspects of the making of the slasher film as well that I feel like the others don't do quite as much. Obviously, that's kind of a premise for Stephen Graham Jones, is following the formula. And this book talks a lot about following the formula of a cliche like 80s slasher. But this also really talks about the boom and heightened popularity of slasher actors in the 80s and kind of their skyrocket to fame and then slow downfall. Primarily the career of Robert Englund, who is the actor who played Freddy in every single Freddy movie, I believe, except for Freddy vs. Jason, and I want to say the 2010 remake, reboot, relaunch, whatever you want to call it. Which is a crime, because Freddy, unlike Jason or Michael Myers, who are characters behind the masks, and I'm not saying anything negative about Kane Hodder. Kane Hodder's an amazing Jason, but the face of Freddy that we see is primarily the face of Robert Englund, which is very similar to our slasher character in this, Nicky Hector. Nicky Hector and Jonathan Zane being the character versus the actor. I loved Triana's subtle commentary. It wasn't so subtle, but if you don't know the actual story in real life, it was. On basically the disservice done to the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise because of the recasting of Freddy. Really draws a lot of inspiration from the entire story of Nightmare on Elm Street's kind of existence as a franchise, where you start with a serious movie and then kind of continue to take it into that serious realm and then slowly turn it into almost a comedic farce. They really talked about that. They poke fun at all of the Friday the 13th too, just getting more and more and more ridiculous and obnoxious with like Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan, and like Jason X, and like the one in like the future where he's like in space. So you get quite a lot out of this. And it's very reverent to the source materials that it's inspired by, while also, in my opinion, still very much Christopher Triana. It is brutal, it is bloody, it is over the top, it is dark, it is also very, very funny. Christopher Triana books have this ability to talk about very, very dark, disturbing things while also having this incredibly fine-tuned dark humor to kind of get you through some of the more difficult things to read. If you've read Gone to See the Riverman, you're probably looking at me like, what are you talking about? Because that book really is like just a beautiful, dark fairy tale rooted in reality. But if you read other books like The Prettiest Girl in the Grave, which I think is the best like nod to his kind of dark humor that I've read so far, this is very much akin to that, though I think it is funnier. And if you are very inclined to love like old school slashers and have many opinions on like the rebooting of slashers today, you're definitely going to want to check this out. I loved the inclusion of like being like of this like washed up celebrity at like HorrorCon. I like alongside your final girl who's definitely more successful than you are. Like it definitely reminded me of like Jamie Lee Curtis being this, you know, Oscar award winning actress who got her start in Halloween. Like there's so many layers in what he is talking about, and it's just it's a love letter to the slasher genre. It's a commentary on the kind of history of slashers as well as where we have slashers today. I love that it was written in 2022, but really talks about like the height of 2010, which is when all of these bad reboots were starting. Now in the 2020s, we definitely have more of a reverence with reboots. I think the Halloween 2018 definitely took us there. We don't talk about Halloween Kills or Halloween Ends, though. Kind of went back to what Christopher Triana is talking about. But while also doing all of that, it is a very good slasher in and of itself. I really like the alternating chapters where we are in the mind of our slasher character as well as our like final girl, and then the other kind of like, let's call them like the camp counselors, like our cliche teenagers. They're not really camp counselors, but like the teenagers that are going to get it. Like I really like being in the minds of all of these characters, and he gives a lot of depth to characters that you would normally just kind of see killed off in a slasher, while at the same time he also gives you those like villains to root for kind of thing, as well as those like teenagers that you're just like, you can't wait for them to get it. There's a lot of love and a lot of reverence to this, and I had so much fun with it. But it is cheesy, it is funny, it is over the top, while also being dark and gory and splatterpunk. So you really just have to know that that's what you're getting into with this book. But this was a 5-star read for me. I love Christopher Triana. I was so happy with that book. Alright, next up we have In the Valley of the Headless Men, a novella by L.P. Hernandez. If you were on my channel, I think it was 2 years ago, L.P. Hernandez's debut novella Stargazers was released, and I loved it. I got it exclusively through Nightworms, the like publishing company that they work with. Dark Gates or Cemetery Gates, I don't remember the name of it. They released it. I love Stargazers. I had never heard of L.P. Hernandez before, and I really enjoyed that book. I do have a whole review on it somewhere. So I was really excited to read this. I'm going to read the back. So it says, Nahanni National Park is one of the last truly wild places on Earth. Accessible only by plane and only when the weather cooperates. It's the perfect place for estranged brothers Joseph and Oscar to have an adventure following the death of their mother. Jillian, Joseph's first love, invites herself along in the spirit of friendship. The park is much more than beautiful. It's mysterious, legends of giants and hidden prehistoric animals. And, among its few visitors, an outsized number of violent deaths, inspiring its second, more seductive name. While dreaming of the future, the group will find themselves confronted by the past. Far from home and far from help, in the Valley of the Headless Men. I wanted to love this. I really did. But it was so difficult to read, especially the further I got into it. I'm still not sure what the message of this book was. There's definitely something about like family ties and grief, and there's so many layers of grief in this book. There's so many trigger warnings. There's loss of parents, there's parental abandonment, there's like betrayal between siblings, there's stillbirth, there's divorce. There's so much in this, packed into this book, and it's so short. It's like 125 pages. And I just felt that LP Hernandez was really taking on too much. And the horror of this story is kind of the relationship horrors and the revelation of these horrible things that have happened to our main character, his half-brother, and his ex-girlfriend. And kind of just going into a valley and having that valley prey upon their insecurities and their fears and their grief, while they are searching for resolutions and comfort in that grief. The problem with it was I didn't find the story horrifying at all. It has this weird kind of cosmic existential element that is completely unexplained. I did not understand the ending, and there's this weird kind of semi-glorification of suicide at the end that I just did not understand. You go through this whole journey, and the end of the book really is this kind of idea of like, you're never gonna overcome your grief, and like the answers that you're looking for will never be given to you, so kind of be happy with what you had message that I didn't love. I also found the formatting of this book very, very confusing. It just, without like breaks or separations, it just kind of starts a new paragraph that looks like it's still part of the moment that we're reading, that just becomes a flashback and then flashes forward again or flashes back to the present. Like there's so many moments where I just had to stop and be like, wait, am I in a flashback? And I just couldn't quite keep up with what timeline I was in certain places. And we get this one character who's introduced to us who's kind of like the harbinger, I would say. And he was so confusing and hard to follow, and I just didn't understand what his point in the story was for. And I don't understand why certain things happened to our characters. I don't understand what the valley was. I don't understand if the valley was actively scary and mysterious in the present, or if people were just drawn to it because of its crazy past. Like, it was just all very, very unclear, and maybe I'm just missing something with this book, but I had such a hard time with it, and it has such a high rating on Goodreads, and I just really wanted to love it. And some of the imagery, like this scene right here, is in the book, and the imagery is at some points beautiful. Like, I loved the woolly hippos, I loved that whole scene, but I don't understand why it was there, and it made it really hard for me to digest the book. So that was a 3-star read, because I did actually really enjoy the first half of the story, but once we got to the second half of the story, everything felt very jumbled and fast-paced, and I didn't understand the message the book was trying to convey, and it was very much lost on me. I don't think I'm going to do an in-depth review on that book, just because I don't really have too much to say beyond I found it hard to connect with the characters, hard to connect with the message, and hard to follow at times. And it felt very first draft concept to me, and not like a concrete story. And I feel like it could have worked better as like a more full-length novel where we had more time with the characters, more time with their pasts, in order to understand their presence and then their eventual futures, because I found it all really hard, and the ending felt so rushed, and I just did not understand it. So that could be a learning issue for me. That could be like a learning curve for me, where I just didn't understand what the book was trying to do. So if you read it, I would love to hear your thoughts on that story, because I did not get that book. So yeah, 3 stars. I keep going back and forth on whether it should be a 2-star read, but there were just glimmers that I did really enjoy, so I can't in good conscience give it the 2-star. Anyways, that is all that I have for you guys today. As always, I try to post every Monday and Thursday, sometimes on Saturdays, and if you enjoy these videos, please hit the like and subscribe buttons down below, and I will catch you on the next one. Mwah!